Okay, thank you all very much. This is, of course, Ursula Burns. She is the non-executive chairman of Vion, Dutch-based company involved in telecom over in Eastern Europe and through the Middle East, as well as a senior advisor to Teneo, and we all know her probably best as her tenure as the former CEO of Xerox. So welcome. It's great to have you here, Ursula.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming here. So we've got a room of people who run businesses, and they have a lot of questions for you about how to run a business.
A lot of men in here.
Yeah, you noticed that. So let's start on sort of one of the basic questions I think facing every business, which is technology, something you know a little bit about, and something that I think everyone is going through or is going to go through whether they want to or not, which is really figuring out how digital fundamentally transforms their company, not just around the edges, but at its core. What did you learn? What did you bring to your experience at Xerox?
First is that it's not anywhere near as complicated as it sounds. I mean, first of all, you got to get somebody who knows a little bit more about it than you do. But oftentimes I thought that we needed to transform or think of some new service, some new exciting thing that we could provide our customers that were digital. We had to do that. But that was not where we started or should have started. There's a whole set of to make the bills significantly easier for people to read and more accurate, and the turnaround time was fast. So cash conversion cycle was lowered, errors were eliminated, et cetera. That's something that's pretty defensive. I mean, you would do that because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it and be more efficient than you. Offensive is actually trying things very quickly. We did this a lot. I'll use Xerox again. When we first started to sell color pages, color copies, the way that a copying machine, if you guys don't know this, we bill everything. Everything, red tone or black, everything. And what we ended up doing was figuring out a way to do what we call pool billing with clients to make it seem as though we were charging them less for their bundle. And we really weren't quite exactly doing that, but it was looked more efficient, and it turned out to be a little bit more efficient for them. So there's a lot of offensive things you can do.
That's right, exactly. So you referred to machine learning. And it brings to mind two things. One is, as we get more and more sophisticated in machine learning or artificial intelligence, how do we make sure we're still controlling the business? At what point do the machines take over and we actually lose some control? And a related question is, what does it do to the workforce?
I think that there's very little chance. There's a great book by a guy named Max Taggart, who's a professor at MIT, and I think it's called Life 2.0, or it's a great book. And he writes about this idea about machines taking. We allow them, force them, program them, et cetera, to do what we want them to do. These machines. So I think that there's very little chance of them taking over. I think the impact on jobs, though, is big. I think that one of the things that we underestimate and don't spend a lot of time articulating to our business partners, meaning employees who work for us, our shareholders, et cetera, is the full extent, positive and negative, that automating processes and using what I call buried intelligence that's buried into your process or your business, and to what extent that will cause you to lower your headcount, lower your people cost. And if you don't have to wait for automated, self-driving vehicles for that to happen. In our billing, it's a great example. We had thousands and thousands of people doing billing, and we got it down to hundreds of people. That was all the effect of automating processes.
Well, and it's the number of jobs, it's also the quality of the jobs and the pay for the jobs. I mean, what does it do to income inequality? I mean, I come from Flint, Michigan, back in the old days, and it used to be you could sort of go to high school, get a job at the plant, and have a good income and raise a family.
That happened way before I started doing this.
You're much younger than I am.
Yeah, so I think we are in the second sliced bread if you can get this working, et cetera. But the flip side of the conversation is that there are, 80,000 long-haul driving, last mile of driving. But the pay scale of those two things are fundamentally different, right? The long-haul truck driver makes $50 an hour, and the short driver makes $20. So there's a significant transition that's about now, right? Before it was farming to...
Tell you that. They got a lot of issues to deal with. They got...
And what we believe, and you have to have time. It's kind of like saying, how do you make time for that? I think it's a bigger issue if you actually continue. The question would be, what? So this is an... I'm serious. Yeah. This is an issue that is I generally don't want to bring it up, right? Because it's kind of like the Christian preacher speaking to a whole bunch of Christians about converting to Christianity, right? Yes. Because it's like, I shouldn't be the person actually speaking about this. You guys should be speaking about this. You should have two white men up on this couch, pick them, and then you should actually ask, two men, it doesn't have to be white men, ask each other, what the hell are you guys doing? Why is it? Because you run the place more than, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck about it, because clearly from my point of view, there is nothing that odd about it, because people say, well, how does it feel? I'm like, well, it feels like being Ursula. I mean, that's how I feel. The bigger question would be, how do you guys feel, right? So at some point, men in my company worked for me. And I think it's important that we start realizing that really well. We know how to kind of deal with problems. We're getting trained better and better. We're graduating more women than men from colleges today, even in engineering. So with all that, the fundamental question would be, so what the heck is going on? Versus why it's a good business proposition. It's just fair. So I actually don't want to, and access to education, and we have to figure out a way to participate in a constructive way, because it's
related question. How do you, while speaking up, avoid having that become your only thing, especially as a black woman, where you're like, things are unfair. The business world is not right. There's too many white men. How do you avoid then? I mean, you just got asked the question, why should there be more women?
I don't think it's worthwhile trying to avoid. I didn't hear Martha Stewart. I can't imagine that I am any less of an individual because I'm a representative of my company. I mean, it's kind of an odd division to me. I mean, I'm an individual who represents a company, but I also represent myself. I have a voice, I have an opinion, I have experiences. And if what the job requires is that I actually eliminate and forget all those, then I say somebody else can have the job. So I'm not willing to do that at all, particularly since I'm a black woman, particularly since I'm a woman. Because obviously the guys are not spending a whole lot of time talking about it. So if we don't do it, if we don't speak out about, now I'm not saying that we should be saying, I like Coke better than Pepsi, I don't, that's not, I'm talking about value-based things, value and values-based things in a country that we know the parameters around. Even if they're changing, we know the general parameters around our country. We're democratic, we're capitalist, so on, so on. So if you see things that are front and center against those kinds of values, I think it's absolutely your responsibility to speak out. And if you lose your job, okay, fine, you can become a politician. That's, I guess, what the recourse was. So I actually don't agree at all. I do agree that I'm a representative of the company, but I'm also a representative of myself and my background upbringing.
And she might alienate 50% of her customers. Certainly if you're a publicly held company, you have to think about that. Yep. There are repercussions, and it happens in different places.
For sure. So I don't, by the way, of course. So that's why I say you got to be, I mean, we're not talking about whether or not you, I don't know, what's something that is actually personal, like religion or what those things I don't get into. I'm talking about tax policy. We're talking about women and women's pay positions. We're talking about race and inequality in this country. We're talking about education. If we don't have opinions about those things, my goodness, what the heck is going on? I mean, it's totally useless. We're wasting the seat that we have. We worked a long way to get here. And if we don't have a point of view about things that are important, I don't mean like flip opinions. I like Mets versus, that's not what I'm talking about, right? Because I don't particularly want to disenfranchise the Met buyers but I do want people to understand, and if they don't buy, fine. I do want people to understand that, for example, the sex trade is, I had this big tweet back at me. I don't tweet, but I did this abolitionist picture about sex trade, sex trafficking. My goodness. People said that you shouldn't do this. I said, well, should I have, there's two choices here,
Take the other side?
Take the other side, or say nothing, right?
Favor
So those
shifting.
things, I'm sure I alienated somebody, and I say, okay, by the way, I never even thought about it from that perspective. Never thought about that there would be people who would think that that was a bad thing. It is so hard for people who are very different, and I am actually not as different as it sounds. I'm just like you guys. The same, you're CEOs of companies. You wait, you worry. You screw up half the time. You got bad employees. You picked the wrong one. You didn't fire the right one. All this stuff. But for some reason, people say because I'm visually different, and because I actually speak like I'm from New York City, which I am. People think that there's this oracle of voice. There's not. You guys are all in the same position. You have points of view. And if we don't, not childishly, not recklessly, like one of our leaders currently does, but I mean, really seriously, we literally have to say, that's wrong. You can't, that's wrong. And we do it occasionally, right? When we have these mass statements about, both sides were wrong, or Mexicans are this, or we don't sit back and go, well, we're just going to be really quiet. If I say that if I counter that, that's just not, I think it's absolutely ridiculously reckless to waste the opportunity.
And one of the things I have learned is you imprint your values on your organization, whether you mean to or not.
Whether you mean to or not.
And you might as well mean it,
Yeah.
because otherwise they're taking values even if you don't mean to be imprinting them.
And the question is,
choice.
why did they pick you? It's kind of an odd thing, but anyway.
Okay.
So I say I don't go for that.
Sorry, we're going to run out of time. One more question right here. He's been very patient.
Steve Martin, really is my name.
Yeah. But do you play the banjo?
No, but I'm born on the same day. That even makes it weirder.
Oh.
And I know him. But CEO Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. About 20 years ago, a mentor of mine, who very involved in civil rights struggle, said to me, and I'd like to get your take on this, to your question to all the white men in the audience. If you want to change the structure of your organization, start blocking unearned privilege. Simple as that. And I thought about it a lot, and we applied it, and in about 10 years, we went from 25% of our workforce executives women to over 50%, and 3 of the 4 successors for me are women. Now, the board chose the older man only because the women voted him the best mentor. So now his successor in 2 to 3 years will probably be a woman unless he stops what he's doing. But it's taught me that's what we have to attack. Because I just like to get your take on that. I think that's what puts us in a comfort zone, and we don't search out unearned privilege. So.
I am 100% aligned with your description of a possible very realistic solution to the problem. By the way, it takes a little bit of patience, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. But Salesforce.com, I'm going to switch a little bit. The CEO, Mark, did an interview that I thought was just amazing about pay inequity. I don't know who saw this. Yeah, it was just amazing. So they asked him a question about his HR person. The company's, 12 years old or something? It's a baby. He knows everybody. He hired them. It's his company. And they said, you have a pay, the CHRO said, you have a pay problem. He said, impossible. It's my company. I'm Mark Benioff. I'm like, cool. I don't believe in inequity, so we don't have that problem. Obviously, fast forward, they do the test. Guess what? Women are paid 82 cents on every dollar that a man is paid in Salesforce.com. So he says, okay, we're going to fix this problem. He calls people together, and he says the fix is going to be just take the woman and give her a raise. Literally, every one of them a raise. How much is it going to cost? $3 to $4 million? Not a problem with it. It's going to do it. I know it's going to hit our P&L, but it's the right thing to do. Some of the men were like, well, that's not fair. You can't do that. Did they earn it? And this is your unearned privilege thing. They actually didn't ask themselves whether they earned the right to be paid, more than the woman. But the women had to sit there and defend that they could get this pay equity jump. And the thinking, these guys were not sexist, I guarantee you. They were not misogynist. They were just basically, the natural thought was, they didn't quite earn that, and we obviously did. So I think you're so right. If you kind of peel it back to what's the reason, I didn't come out here to speak only about diversity, but it's becoming so important because we have voices that are trying to actually make it logical for us to stay where we are, to make it acceptable to stay where we are. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Half the population is eliminated from participating. It's senseless. So I think we have to kind of really be aggressive and progressive and unequal in how we unequal. So we fix inequality problems and issues by applying inequality. That's how you fix them. It's terrible, but it's what you have to do. That's what they called affirmative action. Remember that? Right? That's what it is. I think we have one more.
Okay. I apologize because there are a lot of people who want to ask questions. We just ran out of time. They wouldn't let me come up here unless I promised to get you out of here on time. So Ursula Burns, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been really terrific.
Thank you.
Really terrific.